In this video, we're going to look at how you predict what offspring are going to look like with these genetic crosses. So let's look back at our tongue roll gene. So remember, rolling your tongue is dominant. So we use a big R for can and a little r for can't. Here we have our genotypes. So if I'm homozygous dominant, I can roll my tongue. Heterozygous, I can also roll my tongue. And homozygous recessive, that's the only way I can't roll my tongue, and I have the recessive phenotype. Okay, so let's look at how this works when we're trying to figure out the cross between two individuals. And when we use the word cross, we simply mean they're going to have offspring. So here we have a mom and a dad. And the dad is going to be big R, little r, so he's heterozygous. And the mom is little r, or homozygous recessive. So phenotype-wise, the dad can roll his tongue, and the mom can't. So let's see what that's going to do with their kids. Now, we know from meiosis that each parent is only going to give one of each of their homologous chromosomes. So they're only going to give one allele. That means the dad is either going to give a big R or a little r. He's only going to give one. The mom is, because she only has a little r, she's going to give a little r. So we're going to use a Punnett square to figure out how these combinations of gametes can come together to create a possible offspring. So inside this square, we're going to have what the possible offspring will look like. So we set this up by putting one parent on the top. It doesn't matter which parent is which. Convention-wise, we always put the big letter first. So if it's heterozygous, you put the big R first and then the little r. And then for the mom, we're going to put her on the side. So it doesn't matter which parent goes on which place, but one of them goes on the top and one of them goes on the side. Then all I'm going to do is just like in math, a matrix. I'm going to pull the two letters down. And again, I always put the big letter first. So in this particular square, it would be a big R, little r. On the next one over, the mom's going to give a little r and the dad gives a little r, so little r, little r. Big R, little r, little r, little r. So these are the possible offspring. Now that doesn't mean that if these people have 4 kids, this is the 4 kids that they're going to have. This simply means that these are the 4 possibilities that can be created from this set of genes. Now, each one of these squares represents a 25% chance of having that particular offspring. And again, that doesn't mean that that's for certain. Just because flipping a coin is a 50-50 chance doesn't mean that you're not going to get heads 10 times in a row. So let's look at the genotypes. Sometimes we're going to say, what would be the genotype frequency or percentage? In this case, you have a 50% chance of getting heterozygous and a 50% chance of getting homozygous recessive. So phenotype-wise, you have a 50% chance of being able to roll your tongue as an offspring of these parents, and a 50% chance of not being able to roll your tongue. So let's look at another example. Let's say in mice, brown fur is dominant. So I'm going to make that a big F. And it's dominant to white fur. So I'm going to give white a little f. Now, the 2 genotypes that would make brown fur are homozygous dominant and heterozygous. And only mice that are homozygous recessive are going to be white. So let's say I cross, and remember that means I mate to make offspring, 2 mice that are heterozygous. So that means they are big F, little f, and they're both brown furred mice. So they're both brown mice. Okay, so I'm going to set up my Punnett square. These are my parents. So one goes on the top, one goes on the side. And then I'm just going to match up the letters. And these are my possible offspring. Now notice when we look at the genotypes, we have three possibilities. We have a 25% chance of homozygous dominant, a 50% chance of heterozygous, and a 25% chance of homozygous recessive. But when we look at the phenotypes, we only have two possibilities because there can only be brown or white mice. And so since homozygous dominant and heterozygous are the same, you have a 75% chance of getting a brown mouse and only a 25% chance of getting a white mouse. Now, what's important to note here is that even though both parents were brown, they did create a white offspring. And so we see this sometimes with people where a kid that has red or blonde hair will have two parents with brown hair. And people would say, well, how does that work? Well, that simply means that both of their parents were heterozygous, meaning that they carried the recessive trait, but because they also had the dominant allele, it didn't show up. So this is the case a lot of times when you have people that are wildly different than others in their family. It's simply because they got all the recessive.